You see, kid, they only call you dangerous when they can't control you. That's the trick. That's the whole game. They'll dress it up in fancier words. Unpredictable, unstable, too much. But really, you just didn't fold. You didn't kneel like they wanted you to. You didn't obey when they threw crumbs your way and expected you to bark for more. And that scares the hell out of people, especially the ones who thought they had you figured out. You ever notice how they loved you most when you were broken? When you were confused, begging for answers, waiting for someone, anyone, to see you? That's when they smiled. That's when they said, "You've changed." When you finally stopped bleeding for them. And when you stopped explaining yourself. When your silence became louder than your pain. Suddenly they panicked. 'Cause silence, kid, it means you're calculating. It means you're no longer begging. It means you're watching. And that terrifies them. You were never meant to be easy to understand. You were meant to break the mold, tear up the script, flip the goddamn table, if that's what it takes. They were writing a tragedy for you, and you handed it back, soaked in gasoline. That's why they call you dangerous. Not because you're evil, not because you're wrong, but because you don't fit in their little box. You outgrew it. You lit it on fire and walked away without looking back. And they can't label that, so they demonize it. That's what society does to people it can't control. It labels them threats. It locks them away. It shouts them down, censors their rage, mocks their solitude. They'll whisper behind your back like snakes in a pit, saying you're too much or too cold, when really, you just stopped playing nice. You stopped overgiving. You stopped breaking your back to carry people who wouldn't even crawl for you. You ever seen how wolves act around fire? They circle it, snarl at it, keep their distance. They don't try to fight it, they fear it. You, my friend, are fire. Wild, burning, uncontainable. So they circled you too, didn't they? Called you toxic when you drew boundaries. Labeled you selfish when you stopped being their emotional dumpster. Accused you of changing when you were finally healing. And here's the twisted irony. You did change. You evolved. Grew fangs where you once had open hands. Grew silence where you once had soft explanations. You stopped telling people what you were worth and made them feel it instead. That's power. That's real. And that's why they flinch now when you walk into rooms you used to cry in. They never expected you to survive the storm they left you in. Hell, they counted on you drowning. You were never supposed to rise. That's the part that burns them most. 'Cause you didn't just survive. You rebuilt in silence. You made something brutal, something sacred out of the ruins. You turned your pain into fuel. You turned every lie, every betrayal, every "you'll never make it" into firewood. And now you're burning. You became what they feared you'd become. Untouchable. And not in some flashy, arrogant way. I mean Untouchable in the quietest, coldest, most soul-shattering sense. Like a ghost walking through the life that tried to bury you. Still here. Still standing. Still dangerous. Because nobody could predict you. And they hate that. And you know what the saddest part is? They could have walked with you. They could have stayed. They could have built with you, bled with you, risen with you. But they wanted control more than connection, power more than peace. So they chose to misunderstand you. They chose to frame you as the problem. And that, kid, that's their loss. Because one day, one damn day, they'll scroll back through old messages, old photos, old memories, and you were the one. The calm, the storm, the whole story in one. And by then, you'll be long gone, untouched, unreachable, and dangerous, not because you hurt people, but because you don't need them anymore. They never wanted your truth. They wanted your silence dressed as obedience. You kept telling them, didn't you? In little hints, in tired sighs, in the way your eyes changed from hopeful to hollow. But they weren't listening. They were too busy enjoying the version of you that didn't talk back, didn't demand, didn't ask why. That's the version they loved, the one that didn't cost them anything, the one that gave and gave and gave until it was bleeding from every corner and still smiled like it was fine. You thought they'd notice when it hurt. You thought they'd step in when the weight crushed your ribs. You thought your loyalty meant something. But they were only loyal to the version of you that served them. And when that version died, when you stopped shrinking yourself to make them comfortable, they ran. Or worse, they stayed just enough to drain you, until you finally did what they were too cowardly to do: walk away. You see, they're not used to people who outgrow the pain. They're used to people who stay broken. They're used to puppets, not players. You started thinking for yourself, didn't you? Started asking why your love had to hurt, why your effort was invisible, why your presence was treated like a convenience, not a gift. And that's when they labeled you. That's when the name calling started. That's when they said, "You've changed." But no, kid, you didn't change. You returned to yourself. The version of you before the gaslighting, before the emotional starvation, before the guilt trips disguised as love. You became real. And real? That's too raw for most. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to look at their own patterns, their own manipulations, their own selfishness. So instead of accountability, they project. They call you the problem, because it's easier than facing the monster in their mirror. They'll call you heartless when you finally set boundaries. They'll say you're cold when you stop explaining the scars they gave you. But that's just noise, kid. Background static. People will twist the story to protect their role in it. Don't forget that. You stopped crying, and that threatened them. You stopped waiting, and that exposed them. You stopped needing, and that broke the illusion. They weren't the hero. They were just the comfort you clung to while drowning. But now you can breathe. Now you've got air in your lungs, silence in your veins, and clarity in your eyes. That scares them. Because once you see the truth, once you see how little they were actually giving while you carried everything, you never go back. You can't. The taste of freedom, of self-respect, of peace, it's addictive. It ruins you for anything less. That's why they say you're dangerous, because you no longer play dead just to keep the peace. You choose peace now, the kind that doesn't require betrayal of yourself. So don't you dare apologize for who you've become. You earned this version of you with every sleepless night, every unanswered message, every fake smile you had to wear while they drained the life out of you. You're not rude. You're not mean. You're healed. And healed people don't play nice with their abusers. Healed people don't give second chances to manipulators dressed in affection. Healed people walk alone, and they walk proud. And sure, it gets lonely sometimes. Sure, there are nights when your chest feels like a coffin and your memories whisper in your ear like ghosts. But you're not broken anymore. You're rebuilding, quietly, brutally, completely. And one day, mark my words, the same people who said you were too much will watch you from a distance and whisper, "That was the one who got away." You know what's funny, kid? They always act like your silence came out of nowhere, like you just woke up one day and decided to vanish. But that's the lie they tell themselves to sleep at night. Because the truth is uglier. The truth is, you gave warning after warning in every damn language they understood. Love, time, patience, forgiveness. But they kept stepping on it like it meant nothing. You stayed through things that would have broken most people. You swallowed your pride so many times it started to choke you. You begged in silence, in gestures, in the way you kept showing up after being dismissed. You loved them through confusion, through doubt, through hurt, and still, they made you feel like too much. So when you finally pulled back, when you finally stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped explaining, they acted surprised, like they didn't build the silence brick by brick, like they didn't ignore the cracks until you collapsed into it. That's the game, isn't it? They act blind until you disappear. Then suddenly, they see everything. They remember your value when you stop giving. They realize your presence when it becomes an absence. But by then, it's too late. You're not angry anymore. You're not broken. You're just done. And that, my friend, is the scariest version of anyone. Not the one screaming, not the one crying, but the one who goes quiet, with no desire to return. The one who leaves the door open but walks away without looking back. You see, people think dangerous means rage, violence, chaos. But real danger? Real danger is someone who has mastered the art of detachment. Someone who loved deeply and still chose to walk. Someone who saw the red flags and didn't try to repaint them, just let them burn. That's you now. Not bitter, not cold, just focused. And no amount of guilt they throw at you can change that. It's not just about them either. It's about what this world teaches you the hard way. You learn quickly that being kind makes you a target if you don't pair it with boundaries. That silence doesn't mean peace when it's used to keep your pain hidden. That loyalty becomes your noose if you give it to the wrong people. You used to think that if you loved hard enough, gave enough, stayed long enough, they'd finally choose you. That they'd wake up and realize you were their anchor in a storm they created. But no. Some people love the chaos more than they love who stands with them through it. Some people want attention, not depth. Some people would rather feed their ego than water your soul. And you finally saw it. You stopped waiting for apologies you'll never get. Stopped hoping for growth from people who choose to stay small. You stopped expecting loyalty from people who treat relationships like games. That's the shift. That's the moment you became dangerous. Because when you stop reacting, you start ruling. When you stop needing, you start building. Alone, if you have to. In silence. In shadows. In your own damn lane. And let me tell you, they feel it. Every quiet step you take without them echoes louder than every word you use to scream in pain. They feel the distance, even when they pretend they don't. They feel your absence like a wound they can't explain. They scroll through your life now, watching you grow without them, trying to convince themselves you were always like this. But deep down, they know. They know they had access to the realest, rawest version of you. And they squandered it. They lost something they'll never find again. Not because you're irreplaceable, but because they're incapable of appreciating someone like you. You weren't too much. They were too little. You weren't hard to love. They just didn't know how to handle depth without drowning in their own shallowness. And now they'll try to rewrite the story, make themselves the victim in a tale where you were the one left bleeding. They'll say you switched up, that you became distant, cold, unreachable. But they'll never tell the part where you sat there night after night, holding yourself together in pieces so small you could barely breathe. They won't talk about the days you were screaming internally, hoping someone, anyone, would just notice you were falling apart in silence. They'll never admit how they ignored you, how they drained you, how they kept you as a backup plan while chasing their own chaos. Nah, that part gets edited out, because accountability is too damn heavy for people who can't carry their own guilt. So they point the finger. They smear your name in whispers. They call you toxic for building walls. But forget they're the reason those walls were built in the first place. You didn't turn cold without reason. You turned cold to survive the fire they kept dragging you into. You became distant because every time you got close, you got cut. But here's what they'll never understand. No matter how many times they spin the narrative, you're not angry anymore. You're just awake. You're not bitter. You're aware. And that's worse for them, because they could deal with your emotions, your tears, your vulnerability. That made them feel powerful, like they still had a grip on your heart. But this version of you, the one that smiles quietly, walks alone, doesn't react, that version scares them because they know now they can't reach you. You've outgrown the need for closure. You stopped needing their validation to breathe. You've buried the past, not with flowers, but with fire. That's why they say you're dangerous. Not because you're a threat to them, but because they can no longer control your narrative. You took the pen back. You wrote your own ending. And in this version, you don't beg. You don't chase. You don't break. You rise. See, pain is a teacher, and it taught you well. It showed you how to stop romanticizing potential and start demanding proof. It taught you that not everyone who claims to care deserves a seat at your table. It taught you that peace is worth more than attention, that silence is stronger than screaming, that self-respect is not negotiable. You used to give people the benefit of the doubt even after they stabbed you with it. You used to make excuses for their absence, their cruelty, their half-love. But now you see it for what it is. People either value you or they don't. And if they don't, they lose you. Simple. No more compromising your worth for people who wouldn't bleed a drop for you after you drowned for them. That lesson hurt. That lesson broke you in places no one could see. But it also built something new, something ruthless, something real. You learned to protect your soul, even if it meant walking alone, even if it meant letting go of people you prayed would stay. That's strength. That's power. That's what makes you untouchable now. And still, even now, some part of you will wonder if they ever cared, if they ever looked at you and saw what you truly were. And maybe they did. Maybe that's exactly why they ran. Because nothing terrifies the shallow more than someone who loves deeply, purely, and without games. You were a mirror to their emptiness. You were the storm they couldn't weather, not because you were chaotic, but because you were real in a world that rewards the fake. And realness, it exposes people. It forces them to confront how small they've been living. So instead of growing with you, they let you go. And now they tell others that you changed. Damn right you changed. You evolved. You upgraded. You stopped setting yourself on fire to warm people who'd never lift a finger to save you from the cold. You see, the cruelest part of it all isn't that they left. It's that they left after you gave them everything. After you stayed when no one else did. after you forgave things you had no business forgiving, after you silenced your own pain to protect their ego, after you made excuses for their coldness, their distance, their silence, their sins. That's the part that rips a hole in your chest. Not the absence, but the betrayal of your loyalty. Because you didn't love them halfway. You didn't offer pieces. You gave them the full damn thing. And they took it like it was disposable. Like it was expected. Like your love was some kind of currency they could spend recklessly. And when it ran out, they just walked off. Like they didn't just wreck the most sacred thing you had to offer. And what did they give back? Half effort, excuses, disappearing acts dressed up as I'm going through things. Manipulation with a smile. And you kept showing up like a fool with a bleeding heart, thinking love would be enough to fix what was never yours to carry. But that's the lesson, ain't it? That love alone doesn't save anyone. That sometimes people don't want to be saved. They just want to be worshipped. They don't want a partner. They want a fan. They don't want to grow. They want to control. And the moment you stop playing their little game, that's when they switch. That's when the mask drops. That's when the gaslighting begins. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're the reason they can't be consistent. You're the villain in their story because they can't admit the truth. That they were never ready for someone like you. That your love exposed their lack. That your consistency highlighted their chaos. That your honesty made a mockery of their lies. So they leave, but not before planting doubt in your mind. They leave, but not before making you question everything you gave. And for a while, you do question. You wonder if maybe you were too much. If maybe you cared too hard, gave too deeply, expected too honestly. But here's what you eventually realize. You weren't too much. They were too empty. You weren't broken, you were real. And real doesn't beg to be understood. Real doesn't lower itself to be accepted. Real walks, quietly, boldly, without regret. Because the truth is, you're not meant for everyone, especially not for those who measure worth by convenience. Not for those who flinch at emotional depth. Not for those who run from mirrors that show them what they lack. And yes, your silence will haunt them. Not because you're trying to punish them, but because they know they had access to something rare, and they wasted it. They'll see your glow from afar, and remember how they once stood next to it and still felt cold. That's not your guilt to carry. That's not your burden anymore. That's their consequence. And don't you dare dim yourself because of how they mishandled you. Don't shrink. Don't soften the sharp edges you earned in the fire. You walked through hell and came out with your soul intact, scarred, sure, but intact. That makes you dangerous, not to good people, Not to the ones who see you, who value you, who hold your name gently in their mouth, but to the liars, to the users, to the ones who only love in conditions and contracts. You are a storm they can't predict, a silence they can't decode, a presence they can't fake their way through anymore. And that makes you untouchable. That makes you lethal. Not because you're cruel, not because you're heartless, but because you finally learned how to protect the most dangerous thing a person can carry: self-respect. You don't get here without bleeding, kid. You don't become the storm without first drowning in it. People love to romanticize strength. They love the final product, the unshakable silence, the cold stare, the I don't care anymore vibe. But no one talks about the process. No one talks about the nights you laid there staring at the ceiling, heart ripped open, asking yourself how the hell someone could claim to care and still hurt you like that. No one talks about how you kept answering calls from people who drained your soul, just because you didn't want them to feel abandoned. How you showed up even after they left you waiting. How you gave people a million chances. Not because they deserved them, but because you did. Because you knew what it felt like to be given up on, so you refused to become that for someone else. But they never saw that, did they? They just kept taking and taking and taking until there was nothing left but an echo of the person you used to be. And then, when you finally snapped, when you went quiet, when you stopped showing up, they had the audacity to act like they were the ones who got hurt. That's the insanity of it all. That's what makes you question reality. You spend so long pouring out your soul for people who treat your love like background noise. And when you finally stop, when you finally say, enough, they label you as the villain. But that's how it always works. The one who walks away will always be painted darker than the ones who caused the damage, because your peace exposes their chaos. Your growth reminds them of how small they chose to remain. Your healing becomes a threat, so they mock it, they twist it, they reduce it to bitterness, to ego, to being heartless. But you know what's really heartless? Using someone's loyalty as a doormat, wasting their time, pretending. That's heartless. Walking away, that's survival. So let them talk. Let them whisper your name with venom. Let them spin their little stories to anyone who'll listen. You don't owe the world your truth anymore. You don't owe them explanations. What you owe is to yourself. You owe yourself silence when words are wasted. You owe yourself peace when drama calls. You owe yourself discipline, the kind that makes you walk away even when your heart begs to stay. Because growth, real, painful, soul-tearing growth, it's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not a post on social media. It's what happens when you bury every version of yourself that kept getting hurt and claw your way into something new. It's what happens when you stop begging for love and start embodying it. When you stop pleading to be chosen and start choosing yourself, that's what danger looks like now. Not rage, not revenge, but peace. Peace built on truth. Peace built on boundaries. Peace that doesn't flinch when the past comes knocking. And sure, you still feel it sometimes. The ache, the flashbacks, the quiet mourning of what could have been. That never really goes away. But now you carry it differently. Now, it doesn't own you. It fuels you. It doesn't control your days. It sharpens them. You've learned to wear the scars like armor, not shame. To use the pain, not drown in it. And that, kid, that's what they didn't see coming. That you'd rise. Not just survive, rise. Become something colder, calmer, wiser. Become someone who doesn't explain their worth, who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't entertain anything less than what feeds their soul. You are not the broken version of yourself anymore. You're the rebuilt one. The reborn one. The one who doesn't just walk away, but keeps walking until even the memory of what hurt you fades behind your silence. And that's not just powerful. That's terrifying. And it should be terrifying. Because when you've been through hell and made it out without becoming a monster, without turning your heart to stone, but instead sharpening your soul like a blade, you become something this world doesn't know how to handle. You're not loud. You're not desperate. You're not out for revenge. You're focused. And people can't predict focused. They can't manipulate someone who's no longer moved by chaos. That's the problem now, isn't it? You're not entertaining drama. You're not biting the bait. You're not trying to fix broken people who made a lifestyle out of breaking others. That version of you died in the fire they set. The one who apologized for existing. The one who softened their voice not to offend. The one who tolerated being treated like an option. That one, gone, buried, burned. And in their place stands someone colder, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous. Because now you see everything. You watch. You listen. You know exactly who they are, and you smile anyway. Then walk right past them like they never had a grip on you. You stopped arguing, didn't you? That's the first sign. The moment someone triggers you and instead of snapping back, you just go quiet. That silence, that calm, deadly silence, that's not indifference. That's evolution. You don't fight wars where there's nothing to win. You don't wrestle snakes anymore. You let them bite the air. Let them dance in circles while you stay 10 steps ahead. You don't flinch when they try to provoke you, because now you understand. Their chaos is their prison. Their noise is their leash. You've broken free of that. You used to be reactive. You used to bleed in every direction, hoping someone would see the pain and finally care. But not anymore. Now, your silence is a wall. Your detachment is a boundary, and your presence, when given, is a gift, not a guarantee. That's why they can't stand it now. because they no longer know where they stand with you. And they used to live off, knowing you'd never walk away. They underestimated you. That's where they screwed up. They saw your softness as weakness. They thought because you loved hard, you'd tolerate anything. Because you were loyal, you'd never leave. Because you forgave, you'd always come back. And for a while, they were right. You did stay. You did hope. You did wait. But pain is a hell of a teacher. It shows you who people really are when they think you'll never leave. And when you finally do, when you finally choose silence over conversation, peace over chaos, self-respect over recycled heartbreak, they panic. They start showing the version of themselves they always had hidden. The desperate one, the pleading one, the you've changed one. And that's when you know. That's when the mask shatters. That they never loved you. They loved the control they had when you loved them. But now they're just background noise. Faded characters in a story you've outgrown. And you're writing a new one. One where you're the main character. Where your peace is the plot. Where your healing is the climax. No more begging. No more performing. No more giving away pieces of yourself to people who didn't even know how to hold them. You're whole now. Or maybe not whole, but becoming. Piece by piece, day by day, through silence, through discipline, through choosing yourself every damn morning. That's power. That's what they never saw coming. That you'd stop crying, stop chasing, stop hoping, and start building. Alone, quietly, without asking for permission. And the best part, you're just getting started. They'll never admit it. But your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. See, people don't notice the weight you carry until you stop carrying theirs. They don't appreciate your light until they're left stumbling in the dark you used to protect them from. That's what you were. Light. A damn lantern in a tunnel. They weren't even trying to escape. You kept shining, hoping they'd find their way. And all they did was complain about the glow. They'd squint, mock, act like it was too much, too intense, too emotional, too real. And still, you stayed. Still, you gave. Until you realized they weren't trying to find their way out. They were just comfortable in the shadows. Comfortable being loved without the pressure to grow. Comfortable watching you dim yourself to keep their comfort intact. So you turn the light off, not to be cruel, not to punish, but because you finally understood your glow is not for everyone. And that's the shift, isn't it? When you finally stop trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you, when you stop explaining your worth, stop auditioning for roles in people's lives, where the script was already written to kill your character off in the second act. You stopped chasing closure. You stopped reopening wounds just to prove you were bleeding. You stopped setting yourself on fire to prove you had a heart. And that silence? That unbothered stillness? That's what drives them crazy now. Because people expect explosions when they hurt someone, tears, chaos, a scene. But when you do nothing, when you just vanish, that's when the real panic sets in. Because they can't control what they can't read. And right now, you've become unreadable, unreachable, unpredictable. And nothing is scarier to someone who thrives on control than a soul they can no longer manipulate. You became dangerous because you healed in silence. You didn't post about it. You didn't announce it. You just moved differently, loved yourself more, answered less, slept better, spoke softer. And those who took your pain for weakness, now they don't know where they stand. They thought they broke you, thought you'd fall apart, but you didn't. You reconstructed, and not into the same shape, but into something colder, cleaner, sharper, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because healing isn't about turning the other cheek anymore. It's about learning how to keep both cheeks facing forward and not letting anybody near enough to slap them again. You walk different now. You don't carry the same weight. Your silence isn't empty. It's sacred. It's earned. It's the voice of every time you wanted to scream, but didn't. Every time you wanted to explain, but knew it would fall on deaf ears. Every time you wanted to be chosen and weren't. And yet, somehow, here you are, still breathing, still walking. Not as soft, maybe, but stronger. Not as naive, but clearer. And in that clarity, in that brutal, lonely, quiet clarity, you found something they never expected you to. Yourself. That's what this was always about. They thought the goal was to win them over. But the real victory was reclaiming your soul, learning how to sit in your own presence and not crave anyone else's. Learning how to build, move, think, love, and alone. Not because you want to be alone forever, but because now you know. If someone enters your life, it'll be because they deserve to. Not because you need saving. Not because you're desperate. But because they respect the peace you bled for. And if they don't, they go. Quietly. Like you once did. Without explanation. Without noise. Without regret. Because now you understand. Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of power. You used to think silence was weakness, didn't you? That if you didn't defend yourself, didn't speak up, didn't fight, then you were letting them win. That's how they programmed you, to always explain, to always prove, to always justify your existence. But the truth? Silence is the highest form of control. It's the sound of restraint, of mastery. It's what happens when you realize that not every accusation deserves an answer. Not every insult deserves your energy. Not every relationship deserves resuscitation. You stop giving CPR to dead connections. You stop pouring into cups that leak the moment you turn your back. You stop yelling across oceans for people who wouldn't whisper across the room. That silence, it's not empty. It's full. Full of the words you no longer waste. the battles you no longer pick, the people you no longer chase. It's where the real you lives now, untouched, unbothered, and finally unavailable. You weren't born dangerous. You were made that way, built brick by betrayal, forged in the fire of almosts and maybes. You learned the hard way that not everyone who claims to love you actually knows how to. That some people say forever, just to keep you around until they're bored. That loyalty, to most, is a tool, a leash they use until you figure out you were free all along. You were groomed to doubt your instincts, to question your worth, to put others on pedestals while you stood in the dirt handing them the hammer to break you. But now you've taken all that pain and turned it into precision. You move quieter, think deeper, choose slower. And that slowness? It's not hesitation, it's calculation. You no longer walk into rooms wondering if you'll be accepted. You walk in wondering if they even deserve to know who you are. They lost access to you when they stopped appreciating your presence. That's the equation they never solved. They thought the formula was constant, that you'd always be there, always be soft, always be reachable. So when you changed the math, they panicked. They called you cold, but forgot they were the ones who froze you out first. They said you were distant, but never asked what pushed you so far away. They'll never understand that silence isn't revenge. It's recovery. It's the sound of a soul finally breathing after years of being smothered. And by the time they realize the cost of their indifference, you'll be so far removed from the version of yourself they once knew, they won't even recognize you anymore. They'll be looking for the old you, the one who used to wait, the one who used to explain, the one who used to hope. But that person doesn't exist anymore. That person died the day you realized love without respect is a slow kind of poison. You are not bitter. Don't let them call it that. You are not cold. Don't let them frame it that way. What you are is awake. Finally, fully. And with that awakening comes something brutal. The understanding that not everyone you lose is a loss. In fact, most of the people who walked away weren't walking out. They were being removed by God, by destiny, by the universe, whatever force you believe in, because they were never meant to be part of the next chapter. They were lessons, not lifelines, warnings, not soulmates. And if you're lucky, you'll thank them one day, because without their betrayal, without their indifference, without their absence, you never would have found this version of yourself. The version that doesn't beg, that doesn't chase, that doesn't bend, that stands tall, silent, and completely unfazed by the noise of people who used to define your worth. You want to know the real power, kid? It's not in getting revenge. It's not in proving them wrong with some loud comeback or flashing your success in their faces. That's easy. That's emotional. Real power is in disappearing from their reality while building your own. It's in becoming a ghost in the places where you once begged to be seen. It's in letting them scroll through old memories and realize, too late, that they were standing next to greatness and treated it like an inconvenience. And now all they get is distance. They get the version of you that never calls, never explains, never needs anything from them again. That silence, it's not punishment. It's protection. It's peace. It's the result of finally understanding that energy is currency, and you've been bankrupting your soul trying to afford people who weren't worth a fraction of what you gave. You gave them gold. They gave you dust. And now that you've walked away, they're choking on it. But here's the cruel irony of it all. You were always the safe place, always the soft voice in the chaos, the steady hands, the loyal presence, the calm in their storm, and they still let you go. They still made you question yourself, still made you feel like you weren't enough. And that's the part that almost broke you. Not the betrayal, not the absence, but the realization that you weren't valued where you gave your everything. You stayed, even when everything in you screamed to leave. You fought, even when they made it clear they wouldn't lift a finger for you. You held on, hoping something would change, praying they'd wake up and see what they were losing. But they never did. And so you had to become what they feared most. The version of you that doesn't wait anymore. The version that doesn't explain, doesn't try, doesn't care. That kind of transformation doesn't happen overnight. It takes breakdowns. It takes long nights, sitting with your own worth, questioning if maybe you really were the problem, until one day you look in the mirror and realize, no, you weren't too much. You were too real. You weren't too intense. You were too honest. You weren't hard to love. They were just too small to handle a love that didn't come with conditions. And that's when the shift happens. When the tears dry. When the rage cools. When the ache becomes silence. Not numb silence, aware silence. A kind of clarity that's so sharp it cuts through every illusion they ever tried to trap you in. That's when you stop trying to heal around the same people who keep cutting you. That's when you take the knife out of your back and use it to build something, a new path, a new life, a new self. And now, you're here. Standing on ground you built from nothing, and you're not waiting anymore. You're not explaining how much it hurt. You're not justifying why you left. You're just living, quietly, strongly, with a calm that shakes the ones who once called you weak, and they will feel it. Not because you're watching, but because they are. They always are. They'll see your glow and remember when they dimmed it. They'll feel your silence like a weight they can't shake off. They'll remember the version of you that loved them like no one else ever will. And they'll never admit it. But in the back of their mind, they'll know they called you dangerous because they knew one day you'd realize your worth without them.